And with Biden withdrawing from the presidential race, the big question now is who will replace him as the Democratic nominee. Biden's choice is clear, endorsing Vice President Harris, but it's not official yet and won't be until the Democratic National Convention in Chicago next month. I am joined now by political analyst Dr. Bill Krist to discuss how that process is going to work. Bill, thank you for joining us here tonight.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So we'll get started. Really, this is a historic moment, obviously, for the current president and Joe Biden with his decision today. What will this mean for the Democratic Party now that they go through the process of selecting a new nominee?
Well, there'll be a convention on August the 19th to the 22nd. The delegates will vote for a nominee, and whoever gets a majority of the delegates will be the nominee of the Democratic Party for president, and that's very likely to be Vice President Harris.
Right, and so, we see the endorsement today from Biden for Harris for that role. Can you explain how this process will work at the DNC next month and what will happen with the party's delegates going forward?
Sure. What happens is that in United States law and Texas law, the parties really determine who their nominees are going to be, and the parties have their own rules. Those rules change from biennium to biennium, depending on the will of the Rules Committee and the delegates who are there. The current Democratic Party rules allow the delegates to vote for whoever they think would best represent the wishes of the people who sent them to the convention. And so while they're pledged to Biden in the sense that he won the primaries, that doesn't prevent them from voting for someone else, especially someone else who's endorsed by Biden.
Right, and so now as we look ahead, if Harris does wind up becoming the nominee that they go with for the Democratic ticket, when would she potentially be deciding on a running mate?
Well, that's an interesting question. There are people who are encouraging her now to decide early. Usually a nominee doesn't decide, or at least not tell people who their vice presidential pick is going to be until the convention. Usually it's the first or second night of the convention. This is a little bit of a rare case, so we may see an announcement before the convention actually starts. I wouldn't be surprised if it happens, say, the week before the convention.
Right, and there is always the possibility that there could be someone else who the Democrats decide, right? So if they do decide that they want someone else other than Harris, what do they have to do then?
Well, they just whoever that person is has to get a majority of the delegates. That would be substantially messier, and the reason is because the Biden-Harris campaign has already advised the Federal Election Commission that their name is changing to the Kamala Harris for President campaign, and Harris is the only person who can easily get access to about $100 million that's been raised for the Biden-Harris campaign. So the odds against anyone but Harris being the nominee are extremely remote, but a lot of stuff has happened in the last 2 weeks.
Absolutely, yeah, and so the easiest path forward would be for Harris, but really over the last 2 weeks, you mentioned a lot of stuff has happened. Last weekend we had the attempted assassination of a former president in Donald Trump. This weekend, the current president decides that he is exiting the race. What does this moment mean for us in American political history right now?
Well, there are a number of things we can say about this moment. The first, I think, is you be careful what you want because you might get it. The Republicans have been tarring and feathering President Biden for the last 4 years, telling him he needs to go, telling him to get out, he's a bum. Now he's gone. I mean, he's still the president. He's a caretaker president until the end of his term, but they're not running against him anymore. I think they're in a little bit of disarray about that. They're having to refocus their attack on somebody different than Biden. President Trump is now the oldest person ever nominated by a major party for president. So he doesn't have that card to play anymore. The other thing that's interesting about this is if you'd asked me a week ago, I would have told you this is very reminiscent of the election of 1892 between Grover Cleveland and Benjamin Harrison. It's the only other time in American history where we've had a former president defeat a sitting president. And it's the only time in American history when we've had somebody serve as president in non-consecutive terms. That could still happen. The non-consecutive term thing could still happen if President Trump wins the election. But what's now really more in my mind, and those of us who are old enough to remember, is the election of 1968. The Democratic Convention in '68 was in Chicago. It's going to be in Chicago this year. The convention of 1968 was dominated by the fact that Lyndon Johnson withdrew from the race after some, but not all of the primaries had been held. And his sitting vice president ended up being the nominee of the party, Hubert Humphrey, and lost a very close election to Richard Nixon. There's some parallels. There are also some different things involved. The Vietnam War was the major issue in the 1968 election. Nixon was not an incumbent or a former president. So he had an opportunity to rehabilitate himself for a period of 6 years before even running in 1968. Whereas Trump, people have pretty much made up their mind about whether they like or don't like Trump. So there's a fluidity to this election that's different from 1968, but it's certainly historic. It's something that historians and political commentators like myself will be talking about for a very long time.
Absolutely, and we look forward to seeing how this all plays out over the next few months, but thank you for the context. Thank you for joining us tonight, Bill.
Thank you.